I'm going to link this video in the description, but I watched this really great video called There is a Complexity Threshold That No Civilization Has Ever Survived. And basically it explains this idea that the reason that civilizations collapse is because they've reached this complexity threshold after which they just like collapse under their own weight. Um, and it's like a pattern that is present in every historical civilization collapse. It kind of like breaks down human behavior or like human group social dynamics into something sort of close to physics, which is cool. I think that it makes a lot of sense to think about it that way. The thing that I want to talk about that kind of takes this idea a little bit further. So in that video, they're basically saying civilization it's created as like a response to problems that people have. You know, they coordinate together to come up with these collective solutions to problems. But then the solutions they come up with create more problems that they then have to come up with solutions for. I sort of talked about this before in one of my videos when I was talking about distortion and how every time you add more people into your economic model, you get more and more distortion because of things like information asymmetry and power imbalance and gatekeeping of resources. And then you can add more complexity onto it by trying to use some type of centralized government responses to the distortion that's just inherently present in the system. Each layer of complexity that you add adds more and more distortion. And so then you start adding new layers of complexity to try to counteract the distortion added by previous layers until eventually it just becomes very unwieldy. And eventually the entire thing just collapses. They also say that the biggest problem with this is that there's no way to remove the layers of complexity because the original problems that created the need for those layers of complexity in the first place are still there, and so they still need to be solved. And so just removing the complexity, you still have the problem that you had to solve. So then, you know, the impulse is to just replace that layer of complexity that you removed with a new layer of complexity aimed at, you know, fixing the original problem. But the insight that I have about this is what if labor automation breaks that assumption? I think it's very possible that labor automation could give us the ability to solve the original problems that we solved with many layers of complexity and distortion much more simply. Just for an example, imagine when a civilization is first starting to exist. That mostly happened because the population of humans grew so large that the land was not able to support people living as hunter-gatherers at that population density. And so people started having to farm to actually like cultivate plants and animals for themselves to eat instead of just going out into nature and finding what was already there for them. And so that led to the need for settled agriculture, which required all types of social engineering technologies and layers of complexity to manage that, because in order to farm food manually, there's a ton of work that has to be done compared to the work that has to be done in a hunter-gatherer society when everything you need already exists and all you have to do is go out and get it. But then, because humans are incredibly intelligent and adaptable, they adapted by inventing land ownership and all these other schemes that they came up with to compel people to do the amount of work necessary to maintain their society and do all the work needed to produce enough food to feed everyone. Civilization was just a response to that problem, basically. But then, because of the distortions introduced by that system, you keep having more and more layers of complexity added on to try to correct for the previously added distortions. And over time, it becomes so complex that it collapses. And this has happened in every civilization that's ever existed, basically, that we know of. Um, but the thing is that all of those layers of complexity were added on to correct the original problem, which was, in order to survive, people had to do much more work than they would willingly do if they had any other option. And so this system had to be built to force people to keep doing all of that work, to make it impossible to get the things that people needed without participating in that system. Yeah, there can't be any way to opt out of it, right? Because if people can opt out of it, they're not going to keep working and keep it going, and then it's going to collapse and everyone starves to death. Like the coercion is like baked into it, right? Because that's what produces all of the material goods that people need in order to survive. So there was like never any way to escape from that. The continuation of our economic system requires the continued economic insecurity of the masses, because that is what compels people to do the work needed to keep the machine running. But the thing is that the possibility of labor automation means that you could actually dismantle all of these layers of complexity, or a lot of them, and then just start back over from... We have a situation where we have too many people to be able to survive as hunter-gatherers. But whenever the hunter-gatherers sort of overpopulated their ecosystem, they didn't have the technology that we have now. And so the only way to adapt to that, to produce more food than what was just naturally available in nature, was through, manual human labor. Trying to go back to some social structure that is largely similar to the social structures that early humans, pre-agrarian, hunter-gatherer humans, ancestral humans lived in, using AI and automation to enable a return to that type of living, which was sustainable, and humans lived that way for 300,000 years. So it seemed to work for us, with the way that our brains work, and the instincts that we have that are very hard, if not impossible, to override with conscious effort. But I think that returning to that type of lifestyle, at least in terms of the structures of the social groups that people lived in, I think that that's the only way that humans could coexist without causing massive amounts of destruction and horrible living conditions for everyone. So when I envision like a post-scarcity economy, or what a post-scarcity vision for humanity would look like, I picture people living in a network of autonomous, independent communities, self-governing communities that are small enough that they can have the type of social cohesion that hunter-gatherer groups had. Independently governed, autonomous communities that are able to independently meet most of their own needs just by interacting with their immediate environment around them. And so there's no other person or gatekeeper or bureaucracy standing in between them and their ability to access the necessities of life. So food, shelter, physical safety, freedom from coercion. But yeah, I do think that it would have to be a network, and you'd have to have some way of coordinating to work together towards big projects that affect everyone, and to share knowledge, to share technology. The thing is that people are prevented from even reorganizing in that way now because of the current economic system that we have in place and the current legal system and system of governance. So if I went to call up 50 to 150 of my closest friends and go try to build a community, an independently self-governing community where we could meet our own needs using just what's available in the immediate environment without requiring any permission from gatekeepers to do that, there's nowhere that you can do that. Most people don't even have the time to think about stuff like that because they have to go to work every day and spend all of their energy, trying to earn a living so that they can pay their mortgage and buy their food and pay their electricity bill and stuff. And so they don't really have anything left to try to like solve the problems of civilization or figure out a way to escape from the economic system that we live in. Even if I bought some land, I would have to pay like property taxes on that land, so I couldn't just like stop working. Humanity is at a crossroads, and this can go a couple of different ways. We could end up with this techno dystopian economic death spiral where the entire system just stops functioning completely and nothing else arises to take its place that could enable people to survive. Or maybe there's a way to get that universal high income or universal high quality of life future that people want. You can't do that while maintaining the current system. You can't keep investing in the current economic system and think that it's somehow going to enable people to achieve that universal good quality of life. That's not what it was built for. It was built to make sure that people couldn't survive without working. I think that the only way out of this is to start building something in parallel. I think that the only way that a revolution could work, it wouldn't be, anyone storming the Capitol or burning down warehouses. So when I picture a revolution, I feel like the leaders of the revolution would be the people who can actually offer people a way to opt out of the current system and still survive and to actually like thrive better than what they're able to access within the current economic system. Someone developing the technology that would allow individuals to opt out of participating in our current economic system, whatever that looks like. And then once enough people abandon our current economic system or, stop being available for hire to uphold that system, it won't be able to continue. See, right now, the current economic system and upholding it depends on having human workers to do the work of maintaining it and enforcing the legitimacy of it. But the people that benefit most from the continuance of the system are trying to figure out ways to replace all of those workers with, robots and stuff. And so that they don't have to negotiate with human beings to get them to continue to uphold the legitimacy of the economic system that they benefit from. And so it's like a race, right? Like which happens first? Do people keep being available for hire to this system that is like the ultimate goal is building this dystopia where everyone has digital ID and we're surveilled 24/7 and our money is all tokenized and they can control us by making our microchips not work anywhere except the zone that we're allowed to stay inside of? Or do enough people opt out of this system and stop working to further that ambition? and instead go work on furthering the ambition of creating a meaningful way for people to opt out of dependence on others for their basic needs. Anyway, don't forget to like and subscribe. Leave a comment. Let me know what you think about this.